Hi everyone, with us today is Navin Gupta, Managing Director for South Asia and MENA at Ripple, a leading provider of enterprise blockchain and crypto solutions. So my first question for you, Ripple says it aims to unlock the power of blockchain to dramatically improve the speed, cost and reliability of financial transactions. Could you please briefly name the most acute issues with the existing payment infrastructure?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, great to be here. And I think very easy for you to visualize would be, so you remember post offices, right? So when we used to be at post offices, we would write a letter. So for example, within UAE, and maybe it'll cost you 1 dirham. But when you wanted to send a letter, for example, to America, it'll cost you 10 dirhams, it'll take 7 days. And a lot of times the letters would get lost. And exactly the same place remittances are. People can send money to each other very easily within the country. So for example, here in the UAE, India, US, wherever you want to. But the moment money goes cross-border, it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes 2 to 5 days. It's expensive. It takes sometimes up to 7% of the amount that is being sent because of the fee and the FX rates. And God forbid if you made a mistake. You, for example, wrote a maiden name instead of the married name, you put an extra asterisk, suddenly the payment will go in a black hole and it'll take 2 months. And Ripple changes all that. So we have institutions who are working on the Ripple platform, the sending institution and the receiving institution. So for example, the first thing that we do even before debiting the account, so for example, you were sending money to the US from here in the UAE, we would do a pre-validation. We'll send your message to the receiving institution and say, hey, you know what, this is a message being sent by person A to be received by person B. Can you check it and make sure that indeed you are able to act on this transaction? The bank B, this is the receiving institution, says, absolutely, this works, we are happy to receive it. So you eliminate 95% of error in that pre-validation step itself. Then there is an instant debit to your account, an instant credit, and everybody goes home. So everything that used to take 2 to 5 days, payments would get lost, high amount of errors and high amount of fee. We have made it instant, very cheap price, and also remove majority of the errors that would otherwise happen. And that's what Ripple platform is doing.
Mm-hmm. Basically, you answered my second question, which was how these problems are solved thanks to blockchain. So I think I'll have to proceed to my next question.
No, I want to add something there, right? And that will be very interesting for the audience, right? Traditionally, whenever money used to move around the world, what the banks or PSPs would need to do is they need to have working capital. So this working capital would be tied in terms of nostro accounts, something like a sending institution A, say for example here in the UAE, when it is sending money to somebody in the US, they keep large amounts of money, hundreds of millions of dollars in a bank account in US so that they can move those payments, right? And this is working capital for the banks. Our estimate is there is about $5 to $10 trillion that is stuck in this working capital. And this is the majority of the cost of wire transfer. People always ask us, hey, why is wire transfer so expensive? Why does it cost so much money to move from country A to country B? What they don't realize is that large part of that is the liquidity cost or the working capital cost. And we have eliminated that. So the way we have eliminated that is, let's assume there is a GBP to XRP open order book in exchange licensed by FCA in the UK, right? And there is an active market because crypto markets are 24/7, 365 days a year. There is an open book which is running GBP into XRP. And then there is an open order book that's running between XRP to Philippines peso in the Philippines. So in this case, you don't have to have any liquidity in the Philippines. What you're able to do is take that 1000 GBP, convert that into XRP. XRP within 2 seconds travels to Philippines, and at a government approved exchange, a central bank approved exchange, it gets converted from XRP into Philippines peso, and the payout happens to the instant payment system. So within very short few minutes, everything gets paid out, and now you don't need those hundreds of millions of dollars for the institution or this $5 to $10 trillion to be there. So almost the working capital can go down to zero, eliminating very large amount of cost that earlier would used to be there in the wire transfer system. So we are tackling the elephant in the room, which is the liquidity cost.
What is your take on anonymity in crypto? Because opinions on this topic clash. Some say that anonymity is a problem because it could foster nefarious and criminal activities, but other people argue that anonymity is good because some people live under oppressive regimes, and anonymity is basically the only way for them to be able to do transactions. What is your take?
Yeah. So this is my personal opinion. Most of the people think of lives in extremes, right? They think of right and wrong, they think of black and white, they think of it in extreme. But to me, life is not like that. Life is different shades of gray, right? There would be areas like, for example, today in Venezuela, in Zimbabwe, lots of other places, where anonymity is required because maybe there is some, like you mentioned, oppression from the government, right? So it makes sense because for that use case, for that context, for that environment that people are living in, they need that because that's their lifeline. Whereas there are people who are living in Western world, the only reason where you would want to be anonymous is probably something nefarious, right? So what we need to have is we need to have multiple solutions, right, which caters to different contexts and different parts in the world. And there doesn't need to be one solution that fits all. So to me, there are different shades of gray, and depending upon the context, the rules can be applied, right? So I don't see the world in zeros and ones. I see that as a shade of grays, and hence both solutions should exist, and they would create, depending on the context, different value for the people who are absorbing it.
Mm-hmm. So far, Ripple has focused on payment solutions, but if I heard correctly, there are also plans to introduce crypto staking and investment tools. Could you talk more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, Ripple itself, we are a software company, right? And then the second thing is we are an ecosystem builder. So what we are seeing is there is a huge number of entrepreneurs who are essentially saying, hey, you know what, we want to change the world tomorrow. And 1inch, for example, is a great example. You're a very entrepreneurial company. And then you may say, hey, you know what, we want to build on the top of XRP Ledger because that's a ledger where it's super fast, it's been stable for many, many years, and you want to take advantage of it, for example. And similarly, many, many other entrepreneurs who want to build on the top of XRP Ledger. We want to support them. We want to support them technically, we want to support them financially, we want to give them the confidence to say, hey, you know what, build on the top of it, and we are here to help. So we ourselves would not be doing lots of activity, a lot of other use cases, but we want to support that. So for that, we have done two things. So one, we have a $250 million NFT fund where we are asking artists, collectors, creators, and a lot of other people to come in and build on the top of XRP Ledger, and we are there to support them. Also, we have a billion XRP fund, which roughly is about $1 billion if you look at the current value. And what we want to again do is go with entrepreneurs, support them financially, support them technically, give them the confidence that this you can build on the top of XRP Ledger to build up the ecosystem. So Ripple itself may or may not, but what we do want to do is we definitely want to support the ecosystem because we know if the ecosystem succeeds, everybody wins.
Now I have a few more general questions about the crypto industry.
Sure.
You know, we are speaking at a point when the world's economy is uncertain because of the war in Ukraine and some other factors. Under these circumstances, how do you see the role of a crypto and the blockchain?
Yeah. So personally, I think it's a big boost and a flip to crypto, right? So when a lot of other payment systems were not available, crypto is still functioning against all odds in most jurisdictions around the world, including Ukraine. So for example, we within our Ripple, our number of our employees' families come from Ukraine, and we were able to support them because there was a crypto mechanism that was available for us to be able to still send money into Ukraine. So to me, this also proves the resistance of crypto, resistance in terms of doesn't matter what's the outside context is, crypto is still able to move, right? The second thing that I would say is it also shows the global nature of blockchain and crypto as well, right? So yes, there will be problems that will happen in a smaller geographical areas, but then because crypto is global, it allows somebody in very remote corner who feels toward that cause to be able to contribute and make a meaningful impact. So me, it's very heartwarming to see so many people around the world coming around to Ukraine to essentially help the people who are in need, and really just people who are struggling, and in some way, I mean, and I'm not talking about the political side, I'm just talking about the social and economic cost of the war, and it'll be in many places, both in Russia and in Ukraine, to essentially make sure that these people can be helped, and then they can go ahead and live their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is your vision of the future of Bitcoin? Is it still a store of value, or could it eventually become a proper payment option?
Yeah. So I think I would say that in terms of two contexts, right? So the one context that I would say is user experience, right? So today, absolutely, the user's experience is I press a button and the payment happens on the other side. They're looking for instant gratification. You look at games, you look at any e-services, you look at physical services. Nobody wants to wait, right? So unless Bitcoin figures out a way to give that instant gratification to somebody who wants to move money from point A to point B, probably it becomes hard, right? So, I mean, as a form of payment, because again, the blocks take certain time to create. So unless that gets fixed, probably it's hard. So I think for the payment system, it's hard unless we fix that gratification issue, right? For me, of course, Bitcoin is great because it's the poster child, it's the one that essentially ushered the blockchain movement forward. But I would also say that Bitcoin also need to figure out a way to manage ESG, right? And I know that now a lot of Bitcoin mining is coming from renewable sources, but it does have an opportunity cost. When I say opportunity cost, that renewable, instead of powering X, is being used for Bitcoin mining. And I think all these things are doable. So to me, it's on the right path. Bitcoin is the poster child. People trust Bitcoin. Bitcoin's code is still one of the most valid codes in the world. And to me, I'm bullish. But at the same time, can it improve? The answer is yes.
What do you think about crypto regulation? Is existing regulation efficient enough? And if not, what could be done to improve it?
Yeah. So I would say, firstly, existing regulation is not efficient, right? And the reason it's not efficient is it's not meant for 24/7, 365 days value, Internet of Value world, right? Similarly, for example, post office regulation that was applicable for post office isn't valid for internet, because in internet, there are lots of things that need to be regulated differently, right? So to my mind, the first thing is education and awareness. I meet regulators all the time, and I would say still the regulators are in early stages of their understanding of crypto. So we as an industry, instead of, I wouldn't say being against the regulator or essentially saying, hey, we don't want to be unregulated, I think we can play a great role in creating awareness and education to essentially say, hey, forget about the media, forget about the Twitter. Can Mr. Regulator, your team members, can we just do a few hours of session, a day's workshop with you, walking you through what in crypto is actually happening, right? Bringing out the use case, walking you through the technology, answering some of the tough questions that you have in your mind. Some of them you touched on, anonymity, taxation, number of other things, right? And then together can we build towards the world in which crypto can truly become big. It can get to its scale that it needs to, but it's also at the same time protecting and respecting the letter and the spirit of the law, right? And I think to my mind, the use case or the business value is enormous, and the only way we can achieve that is to work in tandem with the regulators.
For years, the crypto space has faced major issues such as scalability and security. Mm-hmm. How far are we now from solving those issues?
So I am a big believer in the ingenuity and the talent of the human mind. So I want to take another example. 2 years ago, nobody had a clue where will you get a vaccine for COVID. And suddenly, boom, in a year's time, something that takes generally 15 to 20 years, the human mind, when it came and created the vaccine, right? To my mind, exactly the same thing is happening in the crypto world. We will face problems, like you said, scalability. We'll face problems sometimes in terms of saying, hey, you know what, we want some kind of a KYC or a validation mechanism on the top of blockchain. And to my mind, there is just so much talent that's going into crypto right now that we are able to solve that problem. And in sometimes existing chains will evolve, right? So they will incorporate features, ideas, functionality that are more relevant for the blockchains to scale up. And in some cases, new blockchains will take over because essentially the old is not required anymore. So it's the form of evolution. And to my mind, it's happening very fast. So to give you an example, I came from the traditional world. In the 90s and in the early 2000s, top talent would go to consulting services and will go to banks, investment banks, Goldman, Citi, right? I worked at Citi. After that, everybody wanted to go to Amazon, Netflix and Google and the top Web2 companies. Today, all that talent is headed towards blockchain. So people like 1inch, we at Ripple, we are able to get the top talent to come and join us. And that's the reason I'm not worried about, because again, the top talent is able to solve these problems.
What is your take on interchain communication? Has there been any sufficient progress in that area lately?
Yeah. So I would say there hasn't been progress that needs to happen, right? And I just want to be very open. I think in blockchain, still there is a lot of tribalism, right? So there is Bitcoin maxis, Ethereum maxis, Solana maxis, and maybe some XRP maxis. And to me, we are still all maybe just 1% of the total world economy. And I think we don't realize that. The first thing is we need to maximize the power of the blockchain. We need to work together to make sure that we are not building a siloed world, so that in the future we are trying to solve the same problems as we are trying to solve in the Web2 world, right? So I think there is a lot more collaboration that can happen between different blockchains, people who are working on different blockchains, and then we can evolve to that. I think, are we at that point? Maybe there is some realization now start to happen, but I think we have not taken enough active steps in that direction.
What can you say about the current state of crypto adoption? Is it too slow or about right? And could anything be done to speed up that process?
Yeah. So firstly, the adoption curve is great, right? So roughly there are about 300 million people in cryptos, and a lot of them are coming through new use cases. So tens of millions of people have joined cryptos through NFTs, right? Because they didn't know crypto, but to buy an NFT, they needed a crypto, so they got educated and they got into it, right? So there are two things that we need to do. So one, more use cases like NFTs. So for example, gaming, and then many other use cases will bring hundreds of millions of people into crypto, and they'll not come into crypto for speculative reason. They will not come into crypto, hey, you know what, we want to buy Ethereum, Bitcoin, or XRP. They will come because I want to play a game, and as a reward for the game, they essentially have a crypto deposited in their wallet. So it's a much easier way for us to be able to bring it in, right? And then the second part that you and me, we alluded to earlier, is work with the regulators. Because if we truly want crypto to go mainstream, we can't be hiding on the table and then playing hide and seek. We essentially say, regulator, what are your concerns? How can we make sure that we address them so that you can bless it and essentially it can become mainstream? So people are not worried about investor protection. People are not worried about scammy people getting into the space, and they can essentially move with confidence and take benefit of the opportunity that has been presented to them.
Thank you, Navin. Thank you for your insights. It was really interesting to talk to you.
Yeah, a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me.